Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking Back to Suicide. This is Dr. Diane Kaufman, though I prefer to be called Diana for my creative self. And I'm the founder director of the Hold On campaign for suicide prevention that uses the power of art to educate, connect, express, and heal. And this is Talking Back to Suicide. And there's my co-host, Kino Isaac, coming to us from South Africa. Kino is a DJ, music producer, entrepreneur, and a mental health advocate for independent artists. And our special guest today is Dr. Stuart Wood. He's coming to us all the way from the United Kingdom. Dr. Wood has a PhD in neuroscience. His life journey includes his being an educator and researcher on medication, his having lived experience of depression, his helping people to face and overcome their fears using his pet snakes, tarantulas, scorpions, lizards, and his becoming an expert on identifying narcissistic abuse and, most importantly, recovering from it. He is the founder director of the Narcissistic Abuse Network that is dedicated to creating positive change through awareness and action in our own lifetime and beyond. He is the author of Escaping the Void: How to Support Victims Out of Emotionally Abusive Relationships. As Stuart so eloquently says, life is rarely easy. We may get sucked into quicksand, wrestle in the mud and blood, doubt our purpose, doubt our ability, face uncertainty, perhaps even death. Each is an opportunity to go under or grow. Welcome, Stuart, to Talking Back to Suicide. We're so glad that you're with us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me onto the show. I hope that what I've got to share with you and with your listeners will resonate with them and hopefully provide some maybe signposts, I don't know, maybe hopefully, if nothing else, encouragement. I think, often we get in difficult situations, particularly when you're talking about issues like, people taking their own life. It's because they see no hope and they see no possibility. And I hope that what I can share with you will just encourage people to hold in there and realize that although it may seem dark, there is hope.
Let's begin by perhaps you're telling us, what is narcissism? And if I recall, there's also is it a Greek myth about Narcissus? So maybe we'll start off with, what is narcissism and how long has it been going on?
Narcissism, it's a very well used and probably overused word today. It's something that people have become aware of, particularly in the last decade or two. And it's a little bit like, I don't know whether you've come across the term Hoover. Here in the UK, we have vacuum cleaners, but some are made by Hoover, and Hoover is that kind of generic term. It just means to suck things up, to vacuum. And narcissism, I think, runs the risk of kind of falling into that trap of just being a word that we throw around and use, but don't fully understand what it is we're talking about. So narcissism is actually, it's a bit like a cake or a bit like a car. So if you think of a cake, you have the ingredients. If you think of a car, you have the various components: the steering wheel, the seats, the body, the chassis, the wheels, the tires, that sort of thing. And all of those individual parts go towards making the car, and all of the ingredients go together making the cake. But if I was to present you with just a wheel or with an egg and say, well, here's a cake or here's a car, you'd be thinking there's something wrong with this guy. He's missed the point. And that's sometimes what we try to do with narcissism, because narcissism really is a collection of traits and behaviors that when they go together and are expressed or used by one person, they have a very detrimental effect on all those around. So there is a diagnosis for narcissism, and the statistical diagnostic statistical manual 5 has a sort of medical definition of narcissism, and they say that in order for someone to have a diagnosis of narcissism, and the diagnosis is called narcissistic personality disorder, the person must have at least 5 out of 9 different categories or criteria. So they must have a grandiose self-importance. So they exaggerate their achievements, and they expect to be recognized as superior even if they have no evidence for that superiority. So it's all about image. They are preoccupied with fantasies about unlimited success, unlimited power. They consider themselves beauty, the pinnacle of beautiful, the pinnacle of beauty. They're the greatest lovers. They're just all round the best. That's how they come across. They have this belief that they're special, and so if they go into a restaurant or if they go into anywhere with public service, they expect to get the best and they expect to be first. These are the kind of people that will walk to the front of a queue and push in without even batting an eyelid, and expect to be served and no one to complain, because obviously everyone just realizes what wonderful people they are and they should be there. We should be almost worshipping their existence. They crave and they need excessive admiration. So they're quite high maintenance individuals, and it can be that if they go out of the spotlight, for example, if they feel that the attention is moving off them to somewhere else or someone else in particular, they will create distractions, they will create noise, they'll create chaos to bring that attention back onto themselves so that they remain in the spotlight and so that everyone sees that it's kind of all about me. Don't you just admire how wonderful I am. They're highly entitled, and so they have an an unreasonable expectation of being treated in a special way, or if they issue instructions, it's not usually instructions, it tends to be more they issue orders. They expect to be listened to, and those orders to be acted upon immediately. They exploit and take advantage of others to achieve their own ends. So they don't have problems throwing someone under the bus or getting someone else into trouble to escape themselves. And one of the issues around this is they have a total lack of accountability. So I might say something. If I was of narcissistic bent, I might say to you, I think you could, your hair could look better today. Or you could say to me, Stuart, your hair looks a mess. And the narcissist in that situation, they don't handle criticism well. So what they would do is they would tend to reflect that onto you and make it your problem. So for example, if you criticize my hair, I wouldn't say, I'll do something about it. It would be, well, that's not very kind, is it? I'm just trying to be helpful. I'm just trying to speak to you. I'm just trying to hold a conversation. And all you can think about is my hair. My goodness, can't you concentrate on what's really important? And suddenly, in that situation, you can imagine someone answering back. But for people who deal with narcissists, it's very often insignificant things that they say, or things that they consider to be insignificant, that will really switch this narcissist into almost uncontrolled rage, or certainly vehement attack back on you, and it's totally unexpected. And this is, this sort of rage, this inability to control their emotions is very typical. I describe narcissists as like a 4 to 7 year old child trapped in an adult body. So emotionally, they've never developed beyond the tantrum phase, and they've never developed resilience to be able to stand up to discussions. So they're the kind of people who, if someone disagrees with you, you're the hater. So it can't be a dialogue. There is no dialogue. There is no relationship with narcissists, because all these things are kind of dysfunctional from a human point. Because, as humans, when we talk, even when we disagree, and especially when we disagree, we have this empathy, or this ability to at least imagine how the other person feels. So if I say something that comes across as being rude, and you say, "Whoa, hang on, Stuart, that sounded quite offensive to me. Is that what you meant to say?" My empathy would go, I've made a mistake here. I said something. Maybe I didn't mean to say it, but I've said something. It's upset you. We need to resolve this. Narcissists lack empathy, or they lack what we call afferent empathy, which is the empathy of understanding the feelings of others and genuinely appreciating them. So whereas a normal person in a conflict would seek to resolve what it was they'd done that was wrong, a narcissist can never be wrong. They can have a thing called cognitive empathy, which is basically learnt empathy. They kind of know what to do in a particular situation in order to get a result. But any kindness they show, any concern, any emotion, it's something that they've kind of learnt, and they've undoubtedly practiced over time to come across as being sincere, but actually underneath it there is nothing. They can't appreciate how we feel, and for them conversation and relationship isn't two-way, it's one way. It's all about control, dominance, it's about being in charge, and it's about getting what you want, kind of regardless of the cost to others. And if you dare to do something better than them, then they have real problems with envy, revenge, holding on to things, days, weeks, months, years, a lifetime. That's typical behavior. If you slight them, they will wait for the time to make sure that they can get you back. And when they do, they will make jolly sure that you suffer, and you're the one that pays for it. And overall, these people tend to be very arrogant, if they're not overtly arrogant. So some narcissists can be very loud and proud and big and domineering. There's another kind of narcissism which is more where the person is more shy and retiring, and so rather than being the big mouth in the room and the social chameleon, that goes around and everybody listens to, they will often withdraw slightly, and they come across as being a little bit what we call self-effacing. So they're a little, they make out they're quite shy. They'll say, "Oh, no, I don't want to do that. No, I prefer to stay in the background." And so they present this kind of submissive kind of personality, but actually inside they have exactly the same problems. They still have all the same considerations. It just tends to be that those people, for example, if you upset them, they may go into a rage, but they will often back right off. They'll withdraw, they'll go quiet. And one of their favorites is to use silence treatment. So they can what we call ghost you for as long as they want, which may be, again, minutes, hours, days, months. And then at the end of that, they will just pick up where they left off as though nothing had happened. And so this whole idea of avoiding faults or problems is something they're masters of, and they will project everything that they they kind of think and do. How they act is what they project onto other people. So if you like, one of the secret weapons if you're dealing with someone, you're thinking, is this a narcissist? Listen to what they say to you, because they will accuse you of exactly how they're thinking. So that's probably for a bit later, but it's that kind of personality. And these people are consistent in their approach. So it's not just a one-off. I think we all have days when we've got out of the wrong side of bed, or something's gone wrong and we want to kick the cat, or we want to shout and scream or take it out on someone. But those are one-offs. With a narcissist, that's part of their personality, it's part of their behavior, and they act in the same way towards everyone. They just happen to be masters of deceit, and they are chameleons at fitting in, saying what they know people want to hear, because they're on reconnaissance mode all the time. They will pick up from you your strengths, weaknesses, your likes, dislikes, what it is that makes you happy, particularly what it is that gets into you, under your skin, and upsets you. They store that, and then as the relationship develops, they will use that, those things again to their advantage. So they may make you feel really good, and then when you're feeling good, they'll suddenly pull you down, and you think, where did that come from? And it's perhaps I'll finish with this on the narcissism thing, but one word that's used a lot, particularly these days, is gaslighting. And gaslighting it's not simply lying, it's not simply evading the truth. Gaslighting is actually a psychological technique that a narcissist will use to mentally destabilize the person that they're trying to control. So they will, a classic example, a friend of mine went to see their friend who thought that she might have a narcissistic husband. Whilst they were there, he came downstairs, made drinks, and he gave my friend a cup of tea, gave his wife a cup of tea, and that he said, and I've got a cup of coffee. Now, they'd seen him put a tea bag into the coffee cup and pour the boiling water in, but he was just saying, oh, well, I'm having a coffee. And his wife said to him, you've just put a tea bag in there. I've not. No, you didn't see that right. I'm sorry, you didn't see that. That wasn't a tea bag. You must have seen that wrong. That was in the other cups. That was in yours and Lynn's cup. That wasn't in mine. Mine's got coffee in it. And despite having seen the reality and having had it in front of his, having seen something in front of their face, which is totally obvious and which with your own eyes has happened, the narcissist will try and convince you that you're wrong and that you've seen a different reality. And what they do is, over time, they change this sense of reality in their victim's head until the victim can no longer trust themselves. And so what the victim then does is rely on the narcissist for guidance and for a guidance for what's true. And so the very person they shouldn't trust is the one person they kind of lean into, and the person that they follow, and they follow blindly. And this is a traumatic experience for them, because trying to escape that situation when you're convinced that the other person is right is incredibly difficult, and because of their volatility, it's very dangerous as well.
Sure. How or why would a person become involved with or in love with a narcissist? Because from all you've described, it sounds like we should be running as fast as we can away from that narcissistic personality, or malignant narcissist. And later we can get into the malignant part. But there is, from personal experience and from what I've read as a psychiatrist myself, people get, involved, trapped, want to be in the glow of the narcissist. But could you say more about what makes that, or at least some of these narcissists, charismatic, and people are in their orbit?
Yes. If you let's take we'll take a family, say a family with two narcissistic parents and two children. One child looks at what the parent does. They experience the deprivation of emotion, of love, of feeling valued, but they see in their parents a very good way of getting what they want without them having to do much, and a way to manipulate others to get what they want without it costing them or seeming to cost them anything. So one child, for example, may grow up to imitate the parents because that's the only pattern of life that they know. The other child, however, may rebel against that, what they're experiencing. And they may actually, if one child shows that they're going to follow the parents, they will become the golden child. They get all the praise and the gifts, and the other child is a bit like the scapegoat. They get blamed. They never get the love. They never get the recognition. And those people who grow up and decide, you know what, I'm not going to be like this, they almost go the other way and become overly empathetic. And so what they're trying to do is they hate conflict, but also because they've been in that situation, they themselves don't want other people to go through it because they know what it feels like, and they feel it acutely. And so what they tend to do is they tend to be more of a rescuer. And as a personality, I'm probably a rescuer. It's the kind of person that when you see a problem, you kind of don't just go in there to help it. You go in to resolve it and to sort it out. And if you're not careful, that boundary is stepped over and their problem becomes your problem, and you get intermeshed and entangled without necessarily realizing it. So you have these people. The third option, obviously, is that the child can grow up actually neither narcissistic nor empathetic, just can grow up to be a normal, balanced child or a balanced adult. So there's not a clear predictor always as to if you come from a narcissistic family, you will be a narcissist, although the chances are higher. But for example, if you come from a family where you've only ever had what you want, where you've never been challenged with no's, where you've been spoilt, given everything you want, those children too can become highly entitled and just expect everything. And because they've never had no said to them, they've got no resilience. And so suddenly when they're confronted with someone saying, no, you can't have it, they'll basically go into a tantrum because they've never had to deal with this idea of not getting what they want. And so there are people, very often people who come from, privileged backgrounds will also drift to become naturally narcissistic through that privilege, because they become isolated from reality and they can't regulate their emotions because they're not used to it. And so you get a relationship where the narcissist meets someone who they think, yes, that will be a good victim. Of course, the person who's the victim or the on the receiving end of the abuse doesn't look around for someone thinking, he's an abuser. What they look around for is a mate, a soulmate. They look for love. They look for connection. They look for empathy. They look for intimacy. And so everything they look for, basically the narcissist doesn't have, but the narcissist does have this brilliant technique of mirroring back what the person wants to see. And so in a narcissistic, or in a relationship at the beginning, you'll see the narcissist will be very generous. They'll be giving lots of compliments, lots of presents, maybe even taking you on holiday, and things that are kind of so big that you think, wow, he must be special.
Is that love bombing?
Yes. Yeah. That they call that love bombing. It's basically, again, it's another technique they use where they kind of go over the top, and the people on the receiving end not only feel overwhelmed with attention, they also develop an underlying commitment or sense of being in debt to the person doing the giving. So from the beginning, there's this psychological drain going on. But the narcissists are brilliant at asking questions to find out, as I said before, what you like, what you don't like. And so they'll be asking lots of questions about you. And if you ask questions about them, they'll give you answers, but just listen out for the kind of answers they give, because they don't give much away. Their answers tend to be quite guarded. They tend to be quite superficial. And also, if you pursue something further that they don't want to, they will immediately change the subject. They might get, they might show signs of being agitated. The trouble is, as I say, people are not looking for this. You're looking for a soulmate and a friend. And so the narcissist plays the part and draws their victim into that relationship, and then starts introducing this sort of gaslighting. They start to twist the truth. Things shift subtly until the victim usually thinks, "Oh gosh, what's going on here? I didn't realize it." And this is what there's love bombing. My brain's gone empty. there's a narcissistic cycle. It's the kind of the rejection phase where they come on and suddenly from nowhere they'll start criticizing you, or they'll just start making you feel uncomfortable and you don't know why. And what that does is it kind of sucks the victim in more, because they're thinking, gosh, what have I done wrong? And then that in itself is another tie that ties the victim into that emotional relationship. And then the narcissist may go back to love bombing. They may then come back to what they call invalidation. So they undermine you and they go through that loop a bit. And then they'll say, "Oh, I don't really want anything to do with you." Well, by this time, the person is so emotionally invested in that relationship that the thought of losing this one person in their life who is their leader and their director is too much. And so the narcissist then is in the position of power, because the victim begs to come back. And they'll say, "Oh, okay then." But as soon as they come back, the narcissist then doubles down and the invalidation gets worse. You might get the love bombing again, but the invalidation gets worse and the relationship just digs deeper and deeper. So from the narcissist perspective, it is sinister, because this is their modus operandi. This is the way they work, because they're not interested in relationship. They're in a transaction from which they will get everything and find somebody who will, we talked about all those things that they needed. They needed to feel important and special and things, and their partner will be giving that to them. So they're getting what this external validation, what we call supply. The narcissist is feeling good, but actually they give very little. They certainly give nothing emotionally back. They'll say the right things, they'll do plenty of physical gifts and material stuff, but actually they just almost suck the person and bond the person.
I was thinking of that, like a vampire sucking the blood supply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's the victim or the target of the abuse is they're basically deceived, and when they find out there's been so much done to them that's disorientated their thinking and made them feel in debt to the other person, that you've got to be an incredibly strong person to say, "No, sorry, I'm going." That won't happen. And that's where you then have this the relationship locked in, and any thought of the victim leaving can trigger within, because the narcissists have no ability to control their emotions. It will trigger rage, it will trigger outburst. And actually in a relationship, it's at the point that the target tries to leave or manages to leave. That's very often when everything goes really bad, and victims are badly abused physically, mentally, and torture and killing is not uncommon in these domestic violence and domestic violence relationships. You know, those are the kind of classic situations where the narcissist is in control, the person is trying to escape, and it damages the ego of the narcissist too much, and they think, well, if I can't have you, no one else can. And they will. It's not unusual for them to certainly attack the other person verbally, attack them physically, yes, even kill them, and then they will turn the gun or the weapon on themselves and kill themselves, because for them that's a better outcome than them losing this input that they've been craving.
Oh my goodness.
So as a psychiatrist, I can imagine your brain is bouncing off the inside of your skull at the moment, because I'm sure in your practice you will have come across people that kind of fit these criteria. And someone like yourself who's aware of it, it's easier to see when you stand back and look for the patterns and the consistency. But for someone in that relationship, they're almost blinded to it because they're not looking for what's actually happening to them. They're looking for genuine connection. The narcissist is looking for control.
I think sometimes too that there's for lack of seeing what's really going on, there can be admiration for that narcissistic individual.
Yes. Yeah. And narcissists are very good at picking people. They're very good at identifying people that are attracted to them. So, in any relationship, we are attracted to another person because that person, there's something about that person that we like, and in that relationship we know that we can give to them, and that will come back to us. Whereas with a narcissist, the victim will sit, or I keep calling the victim, so some people don't like the term victim, but the target of the abuse will admire the narcissist, because the narcissist is, if they're an extrovert, they're drawn to places where they're influential. They crave power, they crave control, they crave importance, they crave status, they crave material possessions, they crave the ideal family. So these people very often come across as being highly successful, very wealthy, and at the beginning likable. And it's only once they've got the person trapped in that relationship that the tables begin to turn, and the people then realize, or that that the target of the abuse begins to realize that it's not all that it was, but end up blaming themselves because it can't be his problem, because he's telling me it's mine and I believe him.
If I were to be in a relationship with a narcissist, would I be at risk for suicide?
Yeah, I think when you think about suicide, it's that loss of hope, or that situation that can't resolve, which is very often what can push you over the edge. And in a narcissistic relationship, I was trying to look up some figures for the percentage of domestic violence suicides that there are, which are a result of it. I couldn't find any, but they will be out there. But if you're in a situation where your whole world has been shattered, and where there is, there may be an escape, but even when you try and escape, this vampire comes after you. And if you manage to get away, they keep attacking you anyway, and they'll totally destroy your reputation. They'll smear you through the mud. They'll, if they can, they'll bankrupt you. They will make sure that you lose your house, your car. They'll spend all your money, whatever they can to destroy you. They will do that without any concern for themselves. And so if you're on the receiving end, that's although that's extreme, that's not uncommon in a narcissistic relationship. If you are on the receiving end of that, then the risk of the environment for someone to be pushed towards suicidal thoughts is there, and it's it's a perfect environment for people seeing no hope and taking their own lives.
Are is that grown-up narcissist, were they a baby narcissist? Is this a genetic problem, a psychosocial developmental problem? How do narcissists develop?
I think it goes back to what I was saying a little earlier about, when you're in a family, if you have narcissistic influence or you get everything you want, you can respond to that psychologically in different ways. And narcissists, certainly if you come from a narcissistic family, there is evidence of generational narcissism. Whether that's actually genetic in the sense of a mutation or a gene a gene coding, it's probably less. It's probably more. There's a thing called epigenetics, which is basically the environment that you're in can influence the genes, that how the genes are expressed. And so no one really knows. No one's found a gene for narcissism per se, but there's certainly it seems to be a mixture of nature and nurture particularly, the upbringing of someone, even someone who's, for example, brought up in a family where, I was brought up in the 60s, and that wasn't so long after the Second World War, and people were still recovering and still had this stoic mindset of, we need to do better, we need to build a better world for our children, and they were set about doing that. And because of that, they didn't have all of the information that we have now on parenting skills and how to be a good parent, how not to be a good parent, what really helps children, what doesn't. They kind of did their best. And I grew up in a family which was a loving family, but it was very much a family of, you earn your love, you earn your respect. If you want to do something, then you have to earn it. And there's nothing wrong with working and earning, but when your identity becomes dependent on what you do and not who you are, I think you shift into that. You shift into that area where you can either move towards being an empath because in order to deal with your emotions, you go about helping other people and making their life less difficult, or you gravitate towards the narcissist to manipulate others to get what you want. So as far as I know, no one has come to a fixed conclusion, apart from it's a mixture. There's genetic influence, there's environmental influence, and certainly, family is probably the biggest.
Stuart, as you were speaking, I started to remember something and thinking about it in maybe a new way. So when I was in medical school, I had attempted suicide and was medically hospitalized. And my father apparently had told me something at that time, something that I had totally blocked out of my memory. So 20 plus years later, my father told me he needed to, or he wanted to apologize to me. And the topic had never come up in 20 something years. My dad said to me that when I had attempted suicide, that he had told me, Diane, the next time you want to kill yourself, tell me, and I'll tell you the right way to do it.
Right.
Okay. And I was grateful that my father apologized to me, I realized that from a psychological, defense mechanism point of view, I was protecting myself by
Yeah.
going into denial about what he had said to me. But maybe that was a narcissistic statement rather
Yeah.
than having a daughter who had attempted suicide and seeing that as a reflection on him. He was telling me that he was the best at how you kill yourself.
Yeah.
So, what are
Yeah.
your thoughts about a parent who would say that to their child?
Um, I, it's like, I think it's like what I was saying at the beginning. It's a question of holding that kind of statement up against other behaviors as well, and see whether there were other behaviors or traits in their understanding and the way they approached, which kind of fitted in more with the narcissistic pattern. But certainly, no, I don't think anyone can listen to that statement and say that was said with empathy. That was certainly said with, as you say, that superiority. Oh, just ask me, I'll show you how to do it. Having completely missed the fact that you'd been in a place where you felt it necessary to try and escape what you were in. So someone with empathy would say to you, hang on, let's just forget about, how you did it, why did you do it, and it will be concerned about in rebuilding you, not solving the problem. And I think sometimes narcissists are problem solvers rather than solution finders.
You're making me laugh, although maybe it's inappropriate to laugh. But in this situation that I was describing and you were commenting on, that my father's solution to the problem was that I should kill myself.
Yeah.
And he would tell me how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I think that's that sort of, narcissists are they can be incredibly, well, they are. No, narcissists are incredibly manipulative, and they're very good at, they're very good at the kind of backhanded comments. So they'll give you what sounds like a compliment, but it's a dig and it's a criticism. The what we call covert narcissists tend to do this. The ones who are shyer and quieter tend to be a lot more stick the knife in your back, destroy your image, etc. Whereas the overt narcissists, the grandiose narcissists, tend to be very focused on what they want. They're a little bit more resilient, but that's resilience is probably the wrong word. They care less about people offending them. The covert narcissist, if you say something that offends them in any way, they will go off on one. They'll go quiet. They'll really take it personally. Whereas with some grandiose narcissists, you can say, "Oh, you're just a complete idiot," and they go, "Yeah, I know, that's fine, isn't it? But I get where I'm going, and they can be a little bit more resistant themselves to criticism. But
Stuart,
I
is
think,
there such a thing as healthy narcissism? Don't we all need a little bit of narcissism?
yes,
Or is that another word we should use?
no, I think healthy narcissism is a word that's actually used a lot because, healthy narcissistic tendencies are those things that we have which help us to get what we want. So if we're in a situation where we need to be more competitive or we need to look after ourselves, then we can step up and we can use those skills to get what we need from that situation. I think where the boundary comes is that a normal person, because we understand our impact on other people, know when to say no. Whereas with the narcissist, it's just an open playing field. There's no boundary. And so however far they need to go to get what they want, which can include, physical violence whatever it takes for them to do, they will do it and not even think about it. So there is a healthy narcissism. We're all narcissistic in some way, because it's part of daily life, but we balance it with that empathy, that ability to understand how our words and actions impact others, whereas narcissists don't care. So it's whatever they do or say is irrelevant to them as long as they get what they want. I think this is one of the most dangerous things with narcissists, because when you've got someone with that mindset in a position of power, which they will often go for, there's a large percentage of people, company CEOs, people in positions of influence, who they're totally after what they want for themselves. It's very much about their image, status, possessions, whatever floats their boat, really. But they can be in that situation. People think of them as being like us, which includes empathy. And so if someone's being really nasty, the normal person thinks, oh, well, surely you can see that that's upsetting that person, and be reasonable with them. Well, you can't. There is no such thing as being reasonable with a narcissist. Narcissists are non-negotiable. And no matter what they say, they're compulsive liars. So they will lie to get their own way. They will promise and not deliver. They will get on board a group of enablers who support them, who may be of the same mindset, or may just simply have been duped by the narcissist into totally believing this is the right person. Yes, I support you. But they also are very good at giving only one side of the story. And so people outside of that, with a personal relationship, like a husband and a wife, or an intimate relationship, the people outside of the relationship do not see what goes on within it, because the narcissist is so good at covering it. So in public, they will be gracious, they'll be friendly, chatty, they'll do everything they should. They put on this act so that when the victim or the target of their abuse says to a friend, this marriage is killing me, they will often say, oh, it can't be that bad. I've never seen him like that. I think you've got it wrong. And actually what that does is it re-traumatizes, and it's just another attack on the victim, on their perception of reality. And it's almost saying what the narcissist says continuously: you have no right to your perception of what's going on. What's going on is what I tell you. And
almost
that's
like
what
you don't exist.
Yes. Yeah. And you exist when you're there as some
like a
means,
mirror to my greatness.
Yeah, or what I want. That you're there as an accessory. You're there as it is very much a transactional relationship. You are my spouse. You get me what I want. You look after the house. You make me look good. You provide me with the ideal family. The children are trophies. You show everyone how good I am, but I can also brag about what a great father I am because I've got such wonderful children. It's all about them. It's nothing about the other person, really.
How do you get out of a relationship with a narcissist? Let's say there's somebody listening right now who's, maybe the first step is awareness, right? Yeah. Awareness of suffering. But how would you advise someone?
Very carefully those are probably two of the most important words, because part of it is it's very difficult to tell unless you've got more information over a longer period of time exactly how your partner's going to respond, because a lot of people who try and get out of relationships and end up in the mortuary, the reaction of their partner, it's the first time that anything has gone that far. And so it's not always easy to understand how the partner is going to react. In looking at a person, you can't always tell whether they're going to be non-violent or extremely violent, really. All you know is that the narcissist is going to react in a strong way. And if he shouts or she shouts, Female narcissists are equally as prevalent as males within the covert and the malignant side. The grandiose narcissists tend to be mainly, I think it's a 3-to-1 ratio of men to women, but there are a significant number of women narcissists, which presents its own problems for men, because man up, men don't cry, men don't complain, men internalize their, don't show your emotions. And what's worse, I'm being beaten up by my wife. Say that to your mates. The first thing is, oh, can't look after yourself. And men have an equally difficult time getting out of these, often because the people who are there charged with helping them, including the police and social services and things like that, they aren't educated sufficiently, and so the person is fighting not only their partner but also those people who are supposedly there to help them. But the general advice is, I recommend that it is it's, if you're trying to escape a relationship, it's done very, very quietly, very secretly, and you don't go around telling. You tell the absolute minimum number of people. Hopefully, in the UK we have some national bodies, but we also have local bodies of people. We have a thing now. Then there's a particular women's aid we have, and I don't know whether you have them there as well, but there are specific groups of people who specialize in supporting people escaping abusive relationships. And so if you're not sure about your own relationship, first of all, find someone in a specialist organization, someone that's associated with narcissistic relationships or abusive domestic violence, that kind of thing. You need someone who can be an outside spotlight on your situation, really, who can look at it objectively and say, yeah, well, you realize this is happening. Because very often when you speak to people who are in these things, in these relationships, when someone speaks back to them and tells them what's happening, it's almost like that's the first time they've realized it. There's so much inside it and encompassed and enclosed within it that they don't even see the patterns themselves until someone stands back and points out to them that it's happening. So having someone with expertise is really helpful. There are specific charities, and I know I've been contacted by individual groups from the States where there are groups of women or survivors who run organizations or charities or helplines, really, that can, domestic abuse hotline and stuff like that. There are these people who you can speak to get another opinion, and if you can get face to face with them, that's better, because obviously communicating with an outside organization, if the narcissist or the abuser gets hold of the fact that you're doing that, they will double down, and it will make your life, it'll be almost as bad as leaving itself, because they will, they'll bully you into not doing it or whatever. So look for expertise, look for people who've been through it. Be very careful who you speak to, but get this outside opinion to get a picture of what's happening. And then there are again, within these organizations, there's often people that you can talk to who will help you develop a kind of plan. If you think you're going to escape, they will help you to develop a plan that's phased, so you can put everything in place secretly before anything happens. And then when you leave, the protection is in place for you as well to stop the narcissist getting at you, because a lot of deaths in these relationships are after the victim's left. The narcissist will hunt them down and find them. So it's a really nasty situation to be in. But I would always say look for expertise, specifically in the area of abusive narcissistic relationships. and domestic violence.
What are your thoughts? I know you've been taking it all in.
Yeah, as always. um, okay, so Diana covered my first two questions, so I won't touch further on that. You've answered, on that. So I am going to spice things up with this conversation, right? We've spoken about the victim and what the victim goes through, what the victim can do to get help, and so on. So now I believe in second chances, and I believe that true intelligence is actually being aware of your own thoughts, your own actions, and actually doing something about it. I've done that for myself with my life because of what I inherited from my own family. And, by working on myself, being aware of those thoughts, actions, reprogramming my subconscious, I've become a better person in society. So I am going to be the defense attorney now for a narcissist who is possibly listening to the show, but is feeling so guilty about himself or herself, listening about all the victims and so on that they have probably, done to in their life. And they probably like, no, there's no hope for me anymore. I'm clearly the bad person here. So I need to now go and take my life. Okay, because this is what Kino is saying, this is what Stuart is saying, this is what Diana is saying. It's over. I've done so much wrong to so many people out there. There's no hope for me. So I'm the narcissist now who wants to make things right. Stuart, what can I do? How can I heal? Where do I go from here? I'm aware of what I've done for so many years. I've abused so many people, friends, family, girlfriends, boyfriends, whoever. Now I'm aware of that and I want to make things right. What can I do?
The statistics are not favorable, and that's being honest. Narcissists do not respond to therapy. They do not respond to change. And actually, every trait of narcissism counteracts everything they need to do to recover.
Because one of
so one of the key things with changing is you've got to recognize a need for change, and a key tenet really of narcissism is the inability to change because of the fear involved or because of the idea of failure or whatever it is. So there are narcissists who seek help, and I'm sure Dan's will have seen these people, but what is consistently shown. See, I'm a big believer in second chances as well, but having been involved with this for so long and I'm not a therapist, but I speak to people who are therapists. I've not found one therapist yet who has had a success with a narcissist changing. And the main problem is that one of the things of narcissism is it's very much a kind of credit card kind of transaction. Give them the card, get what you want. They're driven by the now. They're not driven by the long term. So they focus on the short term win. They're not really bothered about the long term goal. They just get to the long term by lots of short terms and look just at the next step. Unless they're planning domination, and unless they're planning to stay where they are and make themselves, create a situation where a CEO or something like that might have a strategy for how they're going to stay where they are as long as possible. But if you say to them, well, in order to stay, you need to change, very, very few will actually try or even admit that they need to change, because it's always the other person's problem. If they feel, as you say, that they've wronged people, and if there are things, chipping away at their conscience saying, you need to do something about it, then there is hope. The difficulty is for them going through the full duration of therapy required to change from being narcissistic, defensive, controlling, to being in a position where they can begin to accept that other things happen that they have no control over, that they, and that's okay, that they can be okay with that. The problem is a lot of them will start, but then it gets too hard. And because they're not resilient, they give up very quickly. So, typically a recovery program might be 3 to 5 years for them of therapy. Once you get to beyond a year, the numbers just drop off exponentially, because everything that you're asking them to do is so hard that they basically revert to going back to what they were, because it's easier and it's actually less painful for them. So there are examples of narcissists moving along a spectrum from narcissism towards normality, if you like, a normal person with empathy, a narcissist with none. There are people who've moved partway along that and made them at least being self-aware, and the chances of that is really dependent on each individual. If you want to change and are prepared to work at it, you will. How far you get is probably, it's difficult to anticipate, because of the barriers that you're going to meet, or the personal barriers that you're going to meet along the way. Some people have got the determination to work through that and go further down the road, so they are more normal, they're able to understand other people. But narcissists changing from where they are to what you would consider a normal, rational person, I would say you're looking at something like 1%, and that's an arbitrary figure off the top of my head. But as I say, I know of 1 or 2 miracles that have happened, but apart from that, certainly in the area of therapy and helping people, trying to help people to become more balanced and less reactive, and to become more empathetic, it's a very, very steep uphill path, and most of them roll back down again before they ever get near the top.
Yeah, it is a stretch. I agree with you. It is a stretch, but I honestly, and I'm confident about it, that it is possible. Nothing is impossible. You weren't born a narcissist. You weren't born a racist. Those are things you were taught and you developed as you moved along in that. I feel it is a critical focus point, because I'm here personally to save all lives, and I believe in change. It's a godly thing for me. And although the medical field, or whichever field, or even what all of us do, right, we focus on the victim, which, yes, is needed. But if we don't focus on the root and the cause of it as well, we're never going to resolve anything in the long run. So
no, and I agree 100% with you there. I think where it becomes more difficult with something like narcissism is that our brains, as they operate, are what they call plastic. It just means that they can adapt. And so, for example, in my work about helping people get over fears, if I present someone who's scared stiff of a snake with a snake, and they can touch it or hold it or stay in the room, just by facing up to that fear, their brain will rewire and change how it reacts to that situation. And so that next time they see, they encounter a snake, they're not going to be as frightened, or they might not be frightened at all. I think the danger and the problem with narcissism and these kinds of conditions that condition the brain, it's not a normal response. It actually changes the brain to such an extent that the brain is unable to recover because of the way it develops. And I think as a Christian, I believe everyone has the opportunity and should have the opportunity to change. And as I say, a couple of these examples that I've read have been where people have, for example, specifically gone and been prayed with, etc., and things beyond normal have happened. But no matter how much I want or would love them to be able to change physiologically, and as you know, understanding's growing all the time, but there's a friend, Jen Fraser, who's just written a book called The Gaslit Brain, and she's really into the sort of the neuroscience side of things. But there is so much emerging evidence that the brain of narcissists operates in a completely different way that is almost irreparable. Now, things may change and things may, you know, people may find new approaches where you deal with these people in a specific way that helps to unlock those areas that have become closed. But my understanding at the moment is that actually narcissists are very, very, very resistant to change. And the number of narcissists you see changing from being toxic, being manipulative to being normal is very, very small. And, you know, I would love to say, yeah, everyone's got a second chance and everyone's got a choice. At the moment, unless there's evidence that I don't know, which is highly likely, and great opportunity for people who are listening, if they know of these situations or have had personal experience, sharing those would be brilliant, because that you're restricted in some ways. There's so much work going on and there's so much published. There's only so much you can keep up with. So there may be people who are pioneering new techniques that I don't know about. That's quite possible. In fact, that's highly likely. But from what I know myself, if people are narcissistic, for someone who's in a relationship with a narcissist, the most effective treatment is for them to have no contact whatsoever with them. Now, that might not be practical and it might not be possible. It's certainly not comfortable in a family situation, but the ideal is still no contact. If you have a narcissist in your business, for example, because this is a pervasive thing, it's a relational thing. And so a narcissist will impact not just one person, but they'll impact people in all sorts of areas within the company, especially as you go higher up the organization. The only way to actually change the situation is get rid of them, fire them. And people go, oh, no, you can't do that. You can. You're going to have to, because what happens if you leave them in place, they don't change. It's about everyone else around them changing. And what happens is the company eventually votes with its feet. For example, your talent leaves, your experience leaves. And if you've got a narcissist in influential positions, a pretty good chance your company will fold. And that's the bottom line. Jack Welch, who took over, he's the classic, took over GEC in the 80s and 90s. And he was a rampant narcissist. In the time he was with the company, he basically every year there was a compulsory sacking of the lower 10%. So no matter how everyone was fighting to perform, and at the end of the day, it was a very brutal line. If you were below that percentage, you were fired. So in his time he was there, he fired 250,000 people from GE. He developed his own university, which trained other people like McNerney, who went to Boeing, who came to 3M, where I was, Boeing now has endless problems with lack of pipeline of new planes. It has endless problems with safety issues, which are, being repeatedly seen. These have all arisen because the influence of the narcissist is about getting it done quickly, not getting it done properly. And anybody who speaks up against them was fired or vilified publicly or shut up or disappeared. And so, you're not dealing with people who have a rational brain and a rational approach that say, okay, I'll listen to what you have to say. They might listen, might hear the words. They're not going to listen to what you say. They'll continue doing what they do, go down the destructive path. And at the end of the day, you know, in a personal relationship, that might result in a divorce. It might result in a death. In a business, it might end up with a, you know, GE is now only, I think it's manufacturing, focusing on one area, whereas it was a conglomerate for 137 years or whatever. You know, that's the impact that these people have. Jack Welch changed management to the extent that a lot of corporates are toxic by nature because they take on where the profit is the bottom line and the people don't matter. That's a perfect example of the lack of empathy in those situations. Once you withdraw that empathy from any situation, you know, it's very difficult because narcissists can't validate themselves. That's the big problem. They can't do things for themselves. They rely completely on what comes in from outside, what we call external validation. So they depend on people telling them how good they are. They depend on their image being boosted by appearance and everything else. You take away that supply, or even, for example, stop telling them that they're brilliant, and very, very quickly that supply dries up, and they then their whole personality changes, and they can become aggressive, they become vindictive. You know, they start taking it out on other people, very often in subtle ways, but there isn't anything kind of within them that allows them to say, yeah, I need to change. They might recognize it, they might say it, they might try, but at this moment in time, finding the way out for them is a very, very steep uphill struggle. I wouldn't say impossible, because there are those who've succeeded, you know, undoubtedly there'll be those cases that have. But the general approach, I think, when you have an area where the general agreement throughout, you know, medical professionals, through counselors, therapists, etc., and researchers, is no contact. At the moment, that seems quite a clear black and white message that if you're a narcissist, the hope of becoming normal is very slim.
Stuart,
Yeah,
could
it's
you
also,
share?
can I say one more thing?
Yep.
Yeah, I was already, like, I mean, with Jack Welch, right?
Yeah.
It's also the circumstances that you get put into. Like, if you're taking a position as a CEO for a top American company, it comes with a lot of pressure, not only from the board of directors, but also from the shareholders. So he goes in, I agree with what you did, you know, that defined corporate culture all around the world, right? It's all about bottom line. But then you're in a situation during his era, you know, the share price continued to go up quarter by quarter by quarter, you know, because of him moving around earnings, cutting that bottom 10%, as you mentioned. So sometimes you become a narcissist because you put into that position with all that pressure from the board, from the shareholders, that, hey, I want my investment to go up and up and up. And automatically that makes you a narcissist. Would you agree with that?
Not with Jack Welch, no, because he was a failed chemical engineer within GEC. He already had caused problems. He'd already blown up a plant, I think it was, or there was something happened that was very significant. And he got to where he got to by treading on people and by manipulating people. So before he ever took on that top position, he was already narcissistic. There are corporate CEOs who are not narcissists, who understand the whole point, but Welch and his cohort are the ones that changed the approach in business from business being human orientated to produce a product to being a bottom line and human value being zero. And what he did, the whole point of, you know, the whole thing with Welch's progression is that he put the share price above the employees. He was the guy that established that pattern.
Yeah.
He was using techniques at the time people had never come across before, where the profit of the company went above the welfare of the people. And when you put it that way around, you will destroy the company. When you have a CEO, there are plenty of CEOs out there who are making a lot of these big corporates look like amateurs, because they have taken the value system that they have, which is about the importance of human beings, pushing them through the company from the top. And they've created complete culture changes within an organization, to the extent that, some of these places have gone up 3, 5, 10 times in productivity. So it's not the pressure at the top. It's the attitude of the person in that position and how they respond to that. And if you have a narcissist who by definition is dysfunctional relationally, they are not going to react in the same way as someone who sees the value of people and understands that actually, if people are not happy, your company fails. Welch wasn't bothered. He couldn't have given two hoots about whether his workforce was happy. In fact, the fact he actually promoted competition and toxic interaction within his workforce, partly because it gave him a kick. He found it was a great boost to his ego that he could cause such pain, i.e. malignant narcissists, which Diana mentioned earlier. He wasn't interested in his workers at all. He was interested in his bottom line. He was interested in shareholders. He was interested in using the personal jet. He was interested in the 280 or 420 million he got when he left the company. He was interested in keeping use of Jeff Immelt after him did the same thing. He maintained use of the GE company jets. He maintained use of all the benefits, full pension, full share, the lot. So he lost nothing. And even though the company under their direction, it moved to the point where 2 aircraft crashed within a year, killing 300, 400 people. And they were the first 2 crashes in Ethiopian Airlines and I think in Malaysian Airlines, 2 737-800s. They were directly tracked back to shortcuts by Boeing. And so people within the company have been complaining to Welch for years and years that they were shortcutting, and it was having it would have a significant impact on safety. They continued these complaints through successive CEOs, but CEOs weren't interested because they wanted to save the money. And when
it seems like there's a relationship, and maybe you could say more about this, of narcissism and sociopathy.
Yeah, I'm not I think that the whole area of narcissism, sociopathy, and psychopathy, those are kind of 3 very related areas. I'm not a therapist, and I'm not a specialist to the extent of understanding the psychological and the psychiatric implications of those, the differences between the two. But that whole lack of empathy, knowing what you're doing but doing it anyway, because they're not oblivious to what they do. It's a deliberate choice they make to act in this way.
There's that phrase, what, the end justifies the means?
Yeah.
How can our listeners learn more about you, your website, the book that you've written?
Let me just... I will show you the book. It's probably all back to front, but that's what the cover. It's very easy to recognize. It looks like you're having a migraine, basically. Cover. It's called Escaping the Void. This was written. This was actually written as a result of helping a friend out of a narcissistic relationship, which took 4 years for her to get the divorce and probably about 5 years for her to feel safe. And it documents, it isn't just a story of how that happened. It actually looks at what is narcissism, how can you recognize it, how does it manifest itself, what does a healthy relationship look like, what does an unhealthy relationship look like, what sorts of things can you do to help along the way, be careful of what can you do that will make things worse. It's a general handbook on kind of, it's more written around this one-to-one intimate relationship, but it does cover things like narcissism at work as well, and it's got some helpful hints in on how to challenge narcissistic behavior, how to protect yourself against it, etc. Basically, that's on Amazon, so that's available on Amazon. My personal work, I consider myself to be an educator, so I'm not kind of at the forefront. I'm interested in the research that's going on, and I like to keep up to date with what's happening, but I'm not an active researcher. I'm much more an educator, so my role is to let people know about the condition and to sort of pull that information together to give them like a database and some helps on how they can help themselves and help friends and how to support friends, etc. So if that's of interest to them, I am on LinkedIn, and if you, I can send you the links if that's helpful for you.
Yes, please send those links, and I'll post that in the recording description.
Yeah, I'll send the link with a little 1 or 2 liner just so they know exactly what's in each one. That's probably the best thing to do.
Thank you so much, Dr. Stuart Wood. I feel that you have very much educated us on narcissism.
I hope so.
And the risk of suicide, right? Yeah. And we have to love ourselves, right? Exactly. And protect ourselves.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No, it's been my pleasure. Bye. Thank you ever so much for having me on. Bye. You take care. Bye-bye.